The room fell silent the moment she spoke. Not because of what she said, but how she said it. Catherina Marcus, a black maid in a Korean Mafia household, had just greeted the most feared man in Busan using a dialect that shouldn't exist on her tongue. Raw, coastal, dangerous. The kind of speech reserved for men who built empires through blood and the sea. Chairman Kang's eyes widened. His son, Suho, went pale. Every elder, politician, and underboss in that room froze, trying to understand what they'd just witnessed. Was it respect? A challenge? A threat hidden in perfect grammar? In a world where silence keeps you alive and words can end bloodlines, one woman just broke every rule. And now everyone wants to know who taught the foreign maid to speak like a king. Stay until the end. You won't believe where this goes. Like and subscribe if you're ready for a story where language is the deadliest weapon. The teapot was heavier than it looked. Catherina Marcus kept her hands steady as she approached the head of the table, acutely aware that every eye in the banquet hall had turned toward her. Not with curiosity. With something sharper. Something that felt like the edge of a blade held against skin. She hadn't expected to be here. Serving tea to Chairman Kang wasn't part of her duties. She worked in the kitchens, the laundry, the forgotten corners of Suho's Busan estate where foreign help was tolerated but never truly seen. But Leah Jama, the head servant, had fallen ill 30 minutes before the chairman's arrival, and someone needed to pour for the most powerful man in the room. That someone, apparently, was her. Wait. The voice came from her left. Elder Song, a man with silver hair and a permanent scowl, raised one hand. Not her. Catherina stopped. She didn't look at him. She'd learned years ago that looking at these men directly was a mistake. She's competent, Suho said from his position near the door. His voice was calm, but Catherina heard the tension underneath. He was trying to maintain control of a situation that was already slipping. She's foreign, Elder Song replied. Bad luck. Especially tonight. Bad luck is superstition. Suho's tone hardened. My father doesn't believe in superstition. Your father believes in tradition. Elder Song's eyes narrowed. And tradition says, let her serve. The new voice cut through the room like winter whined off the coast. Chairman Kang had spoken. He sat at the head of the table, a man in his 70s with shoulders that still carried the memory of violence and eyes that missed nothing. He hadn't looked at Catherina yet. He didn't need to. His word was final. Elder Song's jaw tightened, but he said nothing more. Catherina moved forward. Each step felt measured, deliberate. She could feel Suho's gaze on her back, could sense the barely contained anxiety radiating from him. He was wondering what she would do. Whether she would embarrass him. Whether letting her serve had been a mistake. She reached Chairman Kang's side. Up close, he smelled like expensive cologne and something older, sea salt, maybe, or the kind of smoke that came from burning wood rather than cigarettes. She lifted the teapot, her movements practiced and smooth. And then she spoke. The formal Busan dialect rolled off her tongue with the practiced ease of someone who'd grown up hearing it, speaking it, living it. Not the polished Seoul Korean that foreigners learned from textbooks. Not the careful, neutral speech that servants used to avoid offense. This was coastal, rough-edged. The kind of language dock workers and crime bosses used when they wanted to show respect without bowing their heads. The room didn't just go quiet. It went silent in a way that felt physical, like all the oxygen had been sucked out at once. Chairman Kang's hand, which had been reaching for his glass, froze midair. His eyes snapped to her face. Not with anger. With something far more dangerous, recognition. Catherina poured the tea. She didn't let her hands shake. She didn't break eye contact when the chairman's gaze locked onto hers, searching for something she wasn't sure she wanted him to find. When the cup was full, she stepped back and bowed. Exactly the right depth. Exactly the right duration. And when she straightened, she met his eyes again. Chairman Kang's question came out quiet, but it filled the entire room. Who taught you? Catherina considered her answer carefully. Around the table, men who controlled territory, money, and lives waited to hear what she would say. Suho had gone rigid by the door. She could see him calculating, trying to figure out if this was disaster or something else entirely. Your kind taught me, Chairman, she said, still in that raw Busan speech. Without meaning to. A muscle in Chairman Kang's jaw twitched. For a long moment, he said nothing. Then, slowly, something that might have been a smile touched the corner of his mouth. Not warm, not friendly, but interested. Sit down, he said. The order was so unexpected that even Elder Song looked shocked. Sit down. At the table. With them. Father, Suho started. I said sit down. Chairman Kang gestured to an empty chair to his right. If she speaks like she belongs at this table, then she sits at this table. Unless you want to tell me she doesn't belong. It was a trap and Suho knew it. If he agreed, he insulted his father's judgment. If he disagreed, he allowed a foreign servant to sit with Mafia elders during a formal gathering. Either choice was a loss. Catherina didn't wait for Suho's answer. She moved to the chair and sat down, her back straight, her hands folded in her lap. She could feel the fury radiating from Elder Song, the confusion from the younger men, the cold assessment from Chairman Kang. You have an interesting accent, the chairman said, switching to that same coastal dialect. Very specific. Nampodong area, if I'm not mistaken. Near the old fish markets. Catherina nodded once. You have a good ear. I grew up near Nampodong. His eyes never left her face. Before it was tourist shops and coffee houses. When it was still dangerous to walk those streets after dark. Some would say it's still dangerous, Catherina replied. Just a different kind of danger now. A few of the men at the table exchanged glances. This was wrong. All of it. Servants didn't banter with the chairman. Foreign women didn't sit at tables with underbosses and elders. And no one, absolutely no one, spoke to Chairman Kang like an equal. But Catherina wasn't speaking to him like an equal. She was speaking to him in the language of respect that his generation understood. The kind that came from the streets, not from boardrooms. The kind that said, I see you for what you are, and I'm not afraid. Where did you really learn to speak this way? Chairman Kang leaned back in his chair, his posture relaxed, but his eyes sharp. And don't tell me you picked it up from television. I listened, Catherina said simply. To men like you. To the way they talk when they think no one important is paying attention. And you paid attention. Always. Elder Song cleared his throat. Chairman, with respect, this is highly irregular. Irregular is interesting. Chairman Kang didn't look at Elder Song. Safe is boring. Tell me, Miss Marcus, what else have you heard while no one important was paying attention? This was the moment. Catherina could feel it. The conversation had shifted from curiosity to testing. Chairman Kang wasn't making small talk. He was hunting for something. I've heard that loyalty is cheaper than it used to be, she said carefully. That some men speak one dialect in public and another in private. That words change meaning depending on who's listening. The temperature in the room dropped. Several men tensed. Suho's hand moved almost imperceptibly toward his jacket, where Catherina knew he kept a gun. Chairman Kang's smile widened. You think someone at this table is disloyal? I think language tells stories that men try to hide, Catherina replied. I think people who learn Busan dialect as adults make mistakes that natives never would. Small mistakes. The kind most people miss. But you don't miss them. No, Chairman. I don't. For a long moment, Chairman Kang studied her. Then he turned to face the table, his gaze sweeping across each man present. Gentlemen, it seems we have a linguist in our midst. How fascinating. The threat in his voice was unmistakable. Someone in this room had made a mistake. Someone had revealed themselves through speech. And now they knew that Catherina had noticed. Elder Song's face had gone pale. Chairman, surely you don't believe. I believe that Miss Marcus has very good ears, Chairman Kang interrupted. I believe that she's been listening carefully. And I believe that some of you should be very concerned about what she might have heard. Suho stepped forward. Father, perhaps we should discuss this privately. No. Chairman Kang's voice was ice. We discuss it here. Now. Miss Marcus, you will stay. The rest of you will answer questions. And if I find that anyone has been imprecise with their language, we will address it appropriately. Catherina watched as the most powerful men in Busan shifted uncomfortably in their seats. She had just become either the most valuable person in the room or the most dangerous. Possibly both. The interrogation that followed was brutal in its subtlety. Chairman Kang asked seemingly innocent questions, listening not just to answers, but to how they were delivered. He would switch between formal Korean and Busan dialect without warning, watching to see who followed smoothly and who hesitated, who used idioms correctly and who fumbled them. Catherina remained silent through most of it, but occasionally the chairman would glance at her, asking without words, "Did you hear that? Did you catch it?" And she would give the smallest of nods or the slightest shake of her head. It was Elder Song who broke first. Not with a confession, but with a mistake. Chairman Kang had asked him about the old days, about specific streets in Nampodong. Elder Song answered confidently, describing landmarks and businesses. But he got the location wrong. Called a building by a name it had never had. Used a phrase that didn't exist until years after he claimed to have lived there. Catherina didn't move. Didn't react. But Chairman Kang saw it in her eyes. "Interesting," the chairman said softly. "That's not how I remember it." Elder Song's confidence faltered. "Perhaps my memory." "Your memory is perfect." Chairman Kang's voice could have cut glass. "Which means you weren't remembering. You were reciting. Something someone taught you. Someone who wanted you to sound like you belonged." The room held its breath. "Chairman, I don't understand." "You understand perfectly." Chairman Kang stood. The movement was slow, deliberate, and everyone at the table tensed. "You learned Busan dialect the way foreigners do. From books. From recordings. From someone who needed you to pass as local. Which means you're not from here. Which means everything you've told us about your background is a lie." Elder Song's hand moved toward his jacket. He never reached it. Two men appeared behind him, guards who had been waiting for exactly this moment. They grabbed his arms and pulled him back from the table. "Search him," Chairman Kang ordered. "Find whatever he's carrying that he shouldn't be." They found it within seconds. A recording device, hidden in his watch. Small. Expensive. Sophisticated. The silence that followed was absolute. Chairman Kang turned to Catherina. "How long have you known?" 3 months, she said quietly. "Since he mentioned the fish markets closing in winter." "They never closed. Not back then. Anyone who actually lived there would know that. And you said nothing." "I'm a maid, Chairman." Who would have believed me? The smile that crossed Chairman Kang's face was genuine this time. Terrifying, but genuine. A maid who speaks like a crime boss and catches spies that my own security missed. "Tell me, Miss Marcus, who exactly are you?" Catherina met his eyes. "Someone who listens." "Not good enough." Chairman Kang gestured, and one of his guards stepped forward. "Take Elder Song somewhere quiet. We'll discuss his employment termination later. The rest of you," he looked around the table. "If anyone else has secrets they'd like to share, now would be an excellent time." No one spoke. "Good." Chairman Kang sat back down and gestured for Catherina to pour more tea. "Now, Miss Marcus and I are going to have a conversation. A real one. Everyone else can leave." The room emptied quickly. Suho was the last to go, and the look he gave Catherina was complicated, part warning, part question, part something that looked almost like respect. When they were alone, Chairman Kang studied her in silence for a long moment. "You're not just a maid," he finally said. "No, but you're not a spy either." A spy would have reported what they found, not waited 3 months. "True. So what are you?" Catherina considered her answer carefully. "Someone hired to observe. To listen. To identify patterns that others might miss." "Hired by whom?" "I don't know. The arrangement was made through intermediaries. Money deposited monthly. Instructions minimal. Stay in the household. Pay attention. Report anything unusual." "To whom do you report?" "A dead drop. I leave written observations. Someone retrieves them." "I've never met my employer." Chairman Kang absorbed this. "And you're telling me this because..." "Because you were going to find out anyway," Catherina said simply. "And because I prefer honesty to whatever alternative you were imagining." "The alternative I was imagining involved you disappearing very quietly." "I know. But you're still here. Still calm." "Why?" Catherina leaned forward slightly. "Because you need me, Chairman." Elder Song wasn't the only one with secrets. You brought me into this room tonight for a reason. You suspected someone. You just didn't know who. I gave you the answer. And what do you want in return? The truth about why I'm really here. Chairman Kang raised an eyebrow. You think I know who hired you? I think you arranged it. Catherina's voice was steady. I think you needed someone in your son's household who couldn't be corrupted or threatened. Someone with no connections to your organization. Someone who would notice things that your own people couldn't. The chairman's expression didn't change, but something in his eyes confirmed her theory. You're very clever, he said softly. I'm very observant. There's a difference. Is there? Chairman Kang poured his own tea this time, a gesture of equality that spoke volumes. Tell me, Miss Marcus, what else have you observed about my son's household? That he's loyal to you but terrified of failing you. That he runs his organization efficiently but not cruelly. That his men respect him but don't fear him the way they fear you. And that he's trying to be something different than what you were, without knowing if that's strength or weakness. Chairman Kang was quiet for a long moment. You see a great deal. It's what I do. And what do you think? Is my son strong enough to lead when I'm gone? Catherina chose her words carefully. He's strong enough. But he leads differently. Whether that's better or worse depends on what kind of organization you want to leave behind. And what kind do you think I want to leave behind? One that survives, Catherina said. One that adapts. One that doesn't eat itself alive the moment you're not here to hold it together. The chairman smiled. A real smile this time. You would have made an excellent advisor. Would have. I'm offering you a position. Permanent. Not as staff. As someone who observes, who listens, who tells me what others won't. Someone who sits at tables and reports what dialect reveals about loyalty. Catherina shook her head slowly. I can't accept. Why not? Because power that depends on silence always rots, she said quietly. You built an empire on fear and loyalty. But you're using me to police speech, to catch people in linguistic traps. That's not strength. That's paranoia. And paranoia destroys organizations faster than any enemy. Chairman Kang's expression hardened. You dare. I dare because you gave me permission to be honest, Catherina interrupted. You don't need me, Chairman. You need to trust your son. You need to let him build something different. Something that doesn't require spies in the household or tests at dinner tables. For a moment, she thought she'd gone too far. Chairman Kang's eyes had gone cold, and his hand rested on the table in a way that suggested he was considering options she wouldn't enjoy. Then he laughed. A short, sharp sound that held no humor but something like respect. My son was right about you, he said. You don't belong in a kitchen. Maybe not. But I don't belong at your table either. Then where do you belong? Catherina stood. Somewhere I choose. Not somewhere I'm placed. She bowed, the proper depth, the proper respect, and turned to leave. Miss Marcus. She stopped. If you're not going to work for me, Chairman Kang said, then I suggest you leave Busan. Men don't forget being exposed by a foreign maid. Elder Song had friends. They'll come looking for revenge. I know. And you're not afraid? Catherina looked back at him. I've been afraid every day since I arrived in this house. But I'm still here. Still listening. Still watching. Fear doesn't stop me, Chairman. It just makes me more careful. She left the room before he could respond. In the hallway outside, Suho was waiting. He pushed off from the wall where he'd been leaning, his expression unreadable. My father doesn't usually let people walk away from conversations like that, he said. I noticed. He's going to have you killed. Maybe. Catherina started walking toward the servants' quarters. Or maybe he respects people who tell him the truth. Suho fell into step beside her. Why did you do it? The greeting. You could have stayed silent. Stayed invisible. Because staying silent wasn't working anymore, Catherina said. Your father brought me here to catch a spy. I caught one. Now I'm done. Just like that. Just like that. They reached the junction where the servants' corridor split from the main house. Catherina stopped. Can I ask you something? Suho's voice was quieter now. Why did you really learn Busan Dialect? The truth this time. Catherina was quiet for a moment. Because language is power. Because the way people speak tells you who they are and where they come from and what they're hiding. Because I learned a long time ago that the best way to survive in places where you don't belong is to understand them better than they understand themselves. Where did you come from? Before here. Somewhere that taught me to listen. She met his eyes. Somewhere that taught me that words can build empires and destroy them. Your father understands that. You should too. She turned to go. Catherina. It was the first time he'd used her first name. Thank you. For catching the spy. For not making me look weak in front of my father's men. I didn't do it for you, she said honestly. I did it because it was time. But she softened slightly. Though I hope you heard what I told your father. About you leading differently. I meant it. This organization, it could be something better under you. If you let it. Suho said nothing. But something in his expression told her he'd heard. Catherina walked away down the dim corridor, leaving behind the banquet hall, the chairman, the life she'd been living in careful invisibility. She didn't know what came next. Whether she'd wake up tomorrow or whether Chairman Kang's men would come for her in the night. But she'd spoken truth to power in the language power understood. And somehow, that felt like its own kind of victory. 3 days later, Catherina packed her single suitcase and prepared to leave the estate. No one had come to kill her. No one had threatened her. The guards at the gate had received orders to let her pass without question. She was walking toward the front entrance when she found Suho waiting by the door. He held an envelope. From my father, he said, handing it to her. Inside was money. More than she'd earned in a year of working as a maid. And a note, written in elegant Korean. For teaching an old man that listening is more valuable than speaking. And for reminding my son that strength comes in many languages. You are welcome in Busan. Always. Catherina folded the note carefully. Tell your father I appreciate the gesture. Tell him yourself. Suho gestured outside, where a car was waiting. He wants to see you before you go. If you're willing. She was. One last conversation with Chairman Kang, held not in a banquet hall but in his private study. He offered her tea. She poured it herself this time. Where will you go? He asked. I don't know yet. And your employer? The one who hired you. I submitted my final report yesterday. Contract fulfilled. I'm free. Chairman Kang nodded slowly. My son tells me you think he can lead this organization better than I did. I think he can lead it differently. Whether that's better depends on what you value. And what do you think I value? Catherina considered. Legacy. Not just power, any criminal can have power. But something that lasts. Something that means your name survives beyond fear. The chairman's eyes crinkled slightly. You're very perceptive. I listen. Yes, you do. He stood and moved to the window, looking out over Busan. I built this organization with violence and loyalty. My son will build it with intelligence and adaptation. Both approaches have value. Both have costs. Then let him pay his own costs, Catherina said. And make his own choices. Chairman Kang turned back to her. If I ever need someone to listen again, truly listen, may I call on you? If you pay well enough, Catherina said with a slight smile. And if you promise not to test me at dinner tables. He laughed. Actually laughed. Deal. She stood to leave. Before she reached the door, his voice stopped her one more time. That first greeting, he said. When you spoke to me in Busan Dialect. You knew exactly what you were doing. You knew it would cause a reaction. Yes. Why? Catherina looked back at him. Because sometimes the only way to make powerful men listen is to speak their language better than they expect. Because I was tired of being invisible. And because someone needed to shake up that room before your son got replaced by people who didn't deserve to lead. So you were protecting him. I was protecting the possibility of change, Catherina corrected. What he does with that possibility is up to him. Chairman Kang bowed. Slightly. A gesture of respect from a man who rarely showed it. Catherina bowed back. Proper depth. Proper form. And in perfect Busan dialect, she said. Take care, Chairman. She walked out of the estate into Busan's bright afternoon sun. Behind her, she left a mafia organization questioning everything it thought it knew about power, loyalty, and the foreign maid who spoke like she belonged. 6 months later, Catherina sat in a cafe in Seoul, working on a freelance linguistics consultation, when someone slid into the seat across from her. Suho. He looked different. More confident. Less haunted by his father's shadow. You're a hard woman to find, he said. I prefer it that way. I wanted to tell you something. He leaned forward. I restructured the organization. Less violence. More strategic thinking. More emphasis on intelligence than intimidation. How's that working out? Better than expected. My father's generation thought I was weak. But the younger members understand. We're adapting. Catherina nodded. Good. And I wanted to thank you. For what you said. About me leading differently. You earned it yourself. Maybe. Suho smiled slightly. But you gave me permission to try. They sat in comfortable silence for a moment. There's one more thing, Suho said. My father wants to know if you'd consider consulting. Not regularly. Just occasionally. When we need someone who can read between the lines. Consulting on what? Negotiations. International partnerships. Situations where understanding subtext is more valuable than understanding contracts. Catherina considered. I won't work exclusively for you. We wouldn't ask you to. And I won't compromise my principles. We wouldn't expect you to. Then maybe, Catherina said. If the situations are interesting enough. Suho stood to leave. One more question. That first night, when you greeted my father, were you really just observing? Or were you testing us too? Catherina's smile was enigmatic. What do you think? He laughed. I think you're the most dangerous woman I've ever met. And I think my father was right to respect you. After he left, Catherina returned to her work. But she allowed herself a small smile. Language had been her weapon, her shield, and ultimately her freedom. She'd walked into a Mafia household as a servant and walked out as someone even the chairman bowed to, not because of violence, not because of threats, but because she understood that words, especially words in the right dialect, delivered with the right tone, to the right person, could shift entire power structures. She'd spoken truth to power in a language power understood. And somehow, impossibly, she'd survived. More than survived. She'd won. And that, Catherina thought, was worth more than any position at any table. If you've made it this far, you've just witnessed a story where the most powerful weapon wasn't a gun or a threat, it was language itself. Where a maid became an advisor by understanding that how you speak is just as important as what you say. Drop a comment below. What would you have done in Catherina's position? Would you have stayed silent or spoken up? Hit that like button if you believe words can change everything, and subscribe for more stories where intelligence defeats violence and the underestimated become unstoppable. Because sometimes, the most dangerous person in the room is the one nobody's paying attention to, until it's too late.